There we go. Woo! Tank's out. Wow. There we go. Yeah, it definitely seems like that is my issue right there. When you look at those brushes, they should not look like that. Whether or not it's the fuel pump itself or an incorrect fuel gauge, today I'm going to show you how to fix both of those problems. The vehicle you see here up on jack stands is a 2005 GMC Envoy. And it does suffer from a pretty common issue. And that issue is a completely non-functional fuel gauge. Regardless of how much fuel is in this vehicle, it always shows empty. And so therefore, we've had to resort to counting our miles. And because that's getting very annoying, I went ahead and ordered a brand new, genuine ACDelco GMOE fuel pump module. And here are the exact part numbers if you're wondering, but they will be linked down in the description below and also at the beginning of this video. Taking a look inside the box, we of course have our brand new made in the USA fuel pump module. This fuel pump module, as the name suggests, not only contains a fuel pump, but it also contains the fuel level sending unit. This guy right here. Now in this case, the fuel pump is actually still fully functional. It's that fuel level sending unit that has actually failed. But because it's an all-in-one system, I have to replace the whole thing. Now before we begin, I must state that I am not a professional technician. I'm just a guy in my garage who likes to work on my vehicles and film the process. So please don't do what I do. Don't copy what I'm doing. Do your own research, your own due diligence, and come to your own conclusions. With that being said, and to go along with the title of this video, here's why you should never mess with your factory fuel pump. Now, because I'm dealing with fuel and an electronic component in the vehicle, the first thing I'm going to do is disconnect the negative side of the battery. And also, because these cables do have a memory and tend to want to go back to where they were, if I let this go, it might actually recreate the connection on its own. So I'm definitely going to want to stuff this thing out of the way, ensuring that there's no possible way this can come back into contact with the battery on its own. If we have a look under the vehicle, you can see the plastic fuel tank here, which is secured with a set of metal straps, but also has this protective bar that runs across the bottom of the vehicle that needs to be removed first. And with that protective bar completely removed, I can now work on loosening the straps. With the straps completely removed and the tank partially dropped, you can see I have the tank resting on my toolbox here. On this front side of the tank, I removed these two fuel lines. And looking at the tank from the other side, if we look up here towards the rear, there's a bunch more fuel lines I had to remove. I did label them, although that's not really necessary because they only go in one way. And if you're curious how these clips work, basically this thing right here on the back is essentially a button. You're just gonna press in on that. And when you press in on this button, you can see on this one here, it'll spread those teeth apart, allowing you to separate the connection. So after getting all of the front and rear fuel lines removed, there's also a couple electrical connectors that I removed, and now I need to remove this clamp on the fuel filler neck. Okay, I just want to give you an overview of exactly where I'm at in this process. You can see I have a fan going there, blowing air under the car and out, and that's to take care of all the gas fumes. And if we take a look under the car here, you can see the tank is partially dropped. Here's the end facing the front of the vehicle, and you can see those are the first two fuel lines I removed. You can see there's the actual top of the fuel pump there, and there are a few electrical connectors that I did have to remove. Now here at the back of the truck, if we look at the fuel tank, there are indeed more connectors I did have to remove. And lastly here, I've been fighting with this hose, and this hose connects the fuel filler neck with the tank. I removed both clamps just so I can test out which connection would actually be easier to come off, and lo and behold, both of them are extremely difficult. However, at this point, I seem to have this side with the fuel filler neck actually coming loose. So as soon as I get that hose to come loose, this tank should fall right out. This is the moment of truth. There we go. Okay. Woo! All right, the tank is officially on the ground. Let's get this thing pulled out. Okay. Tank's out. Wow. Well, here is that tank out of the Envoy, and it actually doesn't look too bad. I do have some cleaning to do, but overall this lock ring and everything still looks like new. There's no corrosion or anything, so I hope this doesn't fight me too hard when I try to unlock it. Of course, this right here is the top of the fuel pump module. Taking a look at the top of the new one, you can see it matches the old one perfectly. Now, because the top of the fuel tank is so dirty, I'm gonna go ahead and clean this area before I attempt to remove this lock ring. All right, with the top of the tank pretty clean, I can feel confident to go ahead and remove this lock ring and pull this thing up and out. Okay, so here's another one of those clips I was talking about. The button is on the opposite side here. I'm gonna try to press it in, and these two little tabs should spread apart. Now you can see that it's loose. I can press the button on the back and these tabs are just spreading themselves apart, and I can go ahead and pull that off. And the same thing goes for this one. There's a button on the back here. I'm pressing it. We did have some fuel come out, so be careful with that. In order to remove this lock ring, I'm gonna need a punch and a hammer, and that's so I can get into these grooves and turn this lock ring so that it unlatches from these clips here. The thing is, I'm dealing with fuel, so I don't want anything that's going to spark. I went ahead and picked up this 3-piece brass drift punch kit, and I will link this down in the description below and also at the beginning of this video through YouTube. Here are the 3 brass punches, and I think I'm gonna use this middle size. I also don't wanna hammer into the plastic tank. This tank is plastic, you don't wanna break it. There we go. That thing just popped right off. So here's that ring, and we're gonna remove this. And because there is still a lot of dirt that was underneath that ring, I'm gonna go ahead and grab the vacuum and very carefully vacuum this out. But I also wanna be extremely careful because there is gas fumes that are escaping, and I don't wanna be sucking those gas fumes up with the vacuum. So I'm probably gonna push this back down to try to lock off some of those fumes, and then I'll vacuum that dirt out. Now with everything pretty clean, I can go ahead and start lifting this fuel pump module out of the tank. Make sure you have eye protection on, just like that. Fuel and things can flick and spray, and you don't want gasoline in your eyes. Well, I don't anyway. Trying to be very careful. Now pulling this out, we do want to be careful because the base of this fuel pump is still filled with fuel. So I'm going to pour it all back in the tank. As much as I can anyway, and we'll set that aside. All right, let's take a closer look at this older unit and see if we can find anything that looks like a potential issue. The top here looks plenty fine. Looking at the side here, everything also looks really good. Now looking a bit closer here, I can see these contacts do look like they're a little bit burnt up. I'm not sure if that's how they were manufactured or if this is through just old age and lots of use. And coming over here to where my main problem was, which was that fuel level sending unit, not quite sure. We're gonna have to take a closer look. And looking extremely close at those brushes, it does look like that one on the right has something going on. I'm not quite sure. Yeah, it definitely seems like that is my issue right there. When you look at those brushes, they should not look like that. And would you look at that, it does look like some metal or something built up on the end of those brushes there. That is obviously causing some kind of arcing situation. That is certainly not good. Of course, those brushes rub up and down on this pad with your fuel level, and that's how the level is sent to the gauge in the cab. Looking close at the connectors for this new unit, you can see that everything looks fresh and brand new. Nothing looks burnt. When you really think about it, even though this vehicle was still running just fine, I would have hated to be out on the road, a long road trip maybe, hundreds of miles from home, only to have the fuel pump go out and have to be towed somewhere to get your car fixed, and well, you know the rest of that story. The new fuel pump module comes with a new seal, so we're gonna put that in place, which just sits right here on that track. Okay, so here comes this new fuel pump. We wanna be extremely careful with that float, not to bend it or hit it up against anything. I'm just gonna slowly but surely get this thing into place. And you might notice this metal tab here. This metal tab goes right where this arrow is on the tank. And of course, this thing is spring loaded. So once you get it to where it needs to be, you're really just gonna have to push it down into place. Just like that. Okay, I'm continuing to put downward pressure on this thing, and I'm just maneuvering this ring into place. And so now I have it in such a way that the ring is now just barely on there, but it's holding everything down. And now that everything is right where I want it, I'm gonna go ahead and start with the brass drift again. There we go. Looks like we just found its home. With the new fuel pump firmly locked into place, I can go ahead and make these top two connections, which is just by pressing them down. At this point, I am officially past halfway, and the only thing left to do is to put this tank back into the car. And just like that, the car is back together. Everything went swimmingly. I've also reattached the negative side of the battery. So let's go ahead and put the key in and turn it to the run position to see if we hear any action from that fuel pump. Here we go. All right, I did just hear that fuel pump prime. Let's do it again. And right off the bat, I am noticing one thing, that my fuel gauge isn't below E anymore. There isn't very much fuel in this tank, maybe just a couple of gallons. And so that seems like it's accurate. Let's go ahead and give it a start. And she's running. Well, we know the fuel pump works because the car is running just fine. And I'm pretty sure, based off of what I'm seeing right here, that the fuel gauge now works as well. You can see right there the total mileage on this vehicle. Although it is a 2005, we only have 49,800 original miles. All right, and here is that Envoy running with the new fuel pump, so we know that works. But I'm about to head to the gas station to fill this thing up and make sure that fuel gauge works. I just put in 16.69 gallons of fuel, and this has a 22-gallon gas tank, so there was more fuel in it than I thought, but let's go ahead and start it up and see what the fuel gauge reads. Okay, here we go. All right. That is a great sign. The first time this fuel gauge has worked in a very, very long time. The gauge now accurately reads a full tank, which means I'm not going to be having to count my miles anymore. Well, what an adventure that was. It was not easy by any means. Having to put your car up on jack stands and dropping that fuel tank, yeah, that's not fun. It's not easy. There's very limited space I'm working with under there. And of course, you have to deal with those gas fumes the whole time. It is definitely not a job for the faint of heart. But I have done this a few times in the past on other vehicles, and so I kind of knew what I was getting myself into. And of course, the payoff is well worth it. Not only do I have a brand new fuel pump in there, and I know that thing's not gonna fail anytime soon, but we have a fully functional fuel gauge. I'm not kidding you guys, it's been broken for years. Well, hey, if you enjoyed this video, if you got something out of it, please don't forget to hit that thumbs up. And if you've watched this far and you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. I'm Jimmy for One Road, and I will see you in the next one.